we now have an assault weapons ban in Illinois. So give us the details of that.
That's right. It took effect immediately on Tuesday night with the governor's signature, and it bans a whole host of weapons. I think there are about 60 or so specific types of weapons that are listed in the new law, along with characteristics that fit this definition that they've created of assault weapons. It also bans magazines that hold more than 12 rounds of ammunition for rifles and shotguns, or more than 15 rounds for handguns. Immediately with the governor's signature, gun shops across Illinois no longer allowed to sell these items. The Illinois State Police are standing up a system where people who have a firearm owner's identification card will need to register guns that they owned before the ban went into effect, and they'll have to do that by the start of next year.
Well, Republican legislators and dozens of suburban and downstate sheriffs have made their opposition clear. Southern Illinois Representative Blaine Wilhour says he will not comply with the law. Let's listen.
A lot of you guys over there despise our founders, and you casually cast aside the principles that this country was founded on. But our founding fathers, they knew what they were doing. See, they had experienced the tyranny of the majority, and they vowed that that was never going to happen in our country.
Brandon, Alex, your thoughts on whether this ban can be enforced?
I think that's the big question going forward, and it's something that repeatedly came up on the floor of the legislature. I think one of the most memorable parts was Darren Bailey, outgoing or now former Senator Darren Bailey from downstate, who, as we know, was the Republican nominee for governor last year. He basically said, come and take it. He said, I and millions of other gun owners in Illinois will not comply with this law. Bold words. Honestly, he might be right. The question really at this point is, what can the administration and law enforcement do to enforce it, especially if, as we just heard, a lot of local law enforcement agencies around the state are not so keen on enforcing it.
Yeah.
Interestingly, Senate President Don Harmon, in his sort of closing remarks, he basically said, well, we'll see you in court. Basically on the defensive side, for all of the supposedly many lawsuits that are going to come through, and also, they're going to do their best.
I think that was a preview. I think it really was. This is going to be contentious for a long time, and it's going to get litigated for a long time because it is a complicated issue, and it is something that not a lot of states have been able to pull off. It's still going to have to be written whether Illinois can reach the finish line with this.
Yeah. Well, Dan, you spoke to a gun shop owner this week. So what is their reaction to this?
The ones that we spoke with are pretty much playing it safe. They don't want to run afoul of this new law. They're still trying to understand exactly what the restrictions on them are. There are questions about being able to repair grandfathered weapons. If somebody comes in and needs a new part for their weapon that they still legally own because they owned it before the ban, can they do that? That sort of thing. So they're poring over it as well. Working with their lawyers, but also I think some of them talking to their lawyers about bringing lawsuits. Those will probably start coming, I would think, as early as next week.
Yeah, I was going to say, are they planning to file right away?
Yeah, I would assume, by next week or the week after, we'll see some of these things start to get filed. And there really is, a very open question based on Supreme Court recent rulings. Illinois is the 9th state to pass one of these so far. They've withstood legal challenges, but the U.S. Supreme Court last summer threw out New York's concealed carry law and raised questions about other restrictions in that ruling. So like Brandon said, this is going to be contentious, and it's going to go on for quite a while, I think.
Well, I want to turn to another new law. Democrats passed a bill expanding protections for abortions and gender-affirming care. What does this new law do, Dan?
It does a lot of things, and actually Governor Pritzker, I think just as I was on my way over here, was at the new State of Illinois building on West Monroe signing it into law. It allows practitioners like advanced practice registered nurses and physician assistants to perform abortion procedures that don't require general anesthesia. A big part of it as well is protecting providers and patients from restrictive laws in other states. So, for example, if a doctor who has a license in Missouri and in Illinois loses their license in Missouri because they perform a procedure that is banned there, they would not automatically lose their license in Illinois. It also is allowing practitioners from other states to come to Illinois and get licensed more quickly. And so it's just a lot of trying to, shield people sort of from these laws that have been passed either in the lead up to or the wake of the Dobbs decision last summer. and to deal with the influx of patients from other states that providers across Illinois have been seeing.
Really cementing that idea that we are the safe haven when it comes to this topic.
That's right.
Yeah. The House and Senate also passed a bill requiring mandatory paid time off for all Illinois employees. What do we know? And why is that a big deal?
Yeah, it will be for all employers, and it's 5 days a week, basically 40 hours of paid leave that people will start earning as soon as they start their job. And I think we saw during the pandemic, it was a big issue, especially with frontline workers, not being able to take time off when they got sick because they wouldn't be paid. And, this was really, an issue that gets talked a lot about in Springfield, but I hadn't seen any real movement on it in the last couple of years. And then it sort of came up out of nowhere in the last couple of days of the lame duck session earlier this week.
Some comments from our friends online regarding the assault weapons ban. Shamrock Bloom says it's about time. Those guns should not be in the hands of private citizens. And Paige Smith says, as a Chicago resident, I'm grateful for a law that removes and restricts gun violence. Shootings and mass shootings are regularly in our community. All right, a whole new group of lawmakers were sworn into office on Wednesday. That includes new Illinois House Minority Leader Tony McCombie. The Northwest Illinois representative replaces longtime Republican leader Jim Durkin. And here is what she had to say on Wednesday.
Our system of checks and balances between our co-equal branches of government is unbalanced and unhealthy for us all, Republicans, Democrats, and independents. So I ask you, Speaker Welch, don't be afraid. Bring us to the table. We are problem solvers, so use our knowledge, benefit from our talents, and hear our hearts. Let us show you that any preconceived notions about Republicans is false.
What do you think, Alex? Is House Speaker Welch going to bring Republicans to the table?
Only if he wants to. And the supermajority, now padded into a super-duper majority last November, means that Democrats in the General Assembly and especially in the House can really choose to involve Republicans or just not, as they have in a lot of cases in most of the legislation that we've talked about so far. I do think that it is going to come down to the individual legislator and Republican legislator and how much they're willing to really work across the aisle. There are some more sort of moderates or collaborative, I would say maybe legislators like the retiring or now retired Representative Mark Batnick, who I think had been recognized as someone who had having a real hand in bipartisan legislation. But then you also have folks like the aforementioned Darren Bailey, who was not as much of a bridge builder, let's say. So I think it might come down to the individuals, and it'll certainly also come down to now leader McCombie to see how much she wants to join in sort of Democratic-led initiatives, or whether it will be better for herself and her members to just sort of resist as a part of a messaging campaign.
What do you think, Brandon? Are we in a new era of bipartisan cooperation?
Ooh, it might be a little soon to say new era of bipartisanship, but it's tough to be optimistic about bipartisanship on any level of government in this state right now. But I think that's what ultimately voters want. That's ultimately what people want is results. That's how results get done. But the Democrats are in a position, do they really have to statewide? So it's going to be interesting to watch, but I would not bet on it. just given the trends.
Yeah. Well, Democrats have had a long super majority in the legislature. They don't need Republican votes to pass legislation. Will Republicans continue to be sidelined then, Dan?
I think so. It's always good politics to have bipartisan support for efforts if you can, but I don't think the Democrats who now control, the House by an even wider margin still have a supermajority in the Senate. They have a second-term governor now. They control all the other statewide offices, the state Supreme Court. I don't think they're going to let interest in bipartisanship just for the sake of bipartisanship get in the way of them getting things done that they want to get done. They, see the election results in November as a mandate, and I think they're going to continue pushing for our Democratic priorities. And I think we may even see a more polarized legislature because a lot of the more moderate Republicans are no longer in the legislature in this new term, and even some moderate Democrats have been replaced by more progressive members. So it's going to be interesting to see how that dynamic plays out.
Who are some of the other new legislators that got sworn in this week?
Oh, there are tons of them. There were a couple really interesting ones that a colleague of mine, Jake Sheridan, wrote a story about. A couple 23-year-olds in the House. Nabella Saeed.
Gen Z is representing.
Yes. Nabella Saeed from the northwest suburbs, who unseated a Republican state rep in November, and then a guy named, I almost said kid, but he's not a kid, named Brad Fritz, who is from Western Illinois, who replaces Tom Demmer, who was the Republican nominee for state treasurer in November.
This is Reset. I'm Sasha-Ann Simons, and we are going behind the headlines in the weekly news recap with Dan Petrella of the Chicago Tribune, Alex Nitkin of the Better Government Association, and Brandon Pope, who's host of On the Block, airing on WCIU Channel 26. A reminder, you can watch the weekly news recap live on the WBEZ Facebook and YouTube pages. You can also leave us comments or questions. Talk to us in that YouTube chat box, and I may just read what you have to say about these stories on air, like Chicago 675, who says the abortion protection bill is going to help JB when he runs for president on the national stage.
He might.
Speaking of